It's 2023, almost 2024, and I really want to test the RTX 2080 Ti. So what better way to test it than using the most expensive RTX 2080 Ti that has ever existed? This is arguably the generation of cards that made NVIDIA really greedy.
Are you sure about that?
They dropped the RTX name, they started pricing 80 class cards over $1,000, and this is what we get. But I want to see how it holds up today. This card is still very much like a 3070 when it comes to performance, but it still has that 11 gigabytes of VRAM, so there are going to be some benefits in some games, but we're going to test that. But before we do that, this is my friend's card. I am borrowing it. It's a lovely card, but it does need to be cleaned up, so we're going to clean it up real quick, and then we're going to jump in some benchmarks at 1440p, just because I feel like 4K is irrelevant for this card. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody. We're about to tear down this 2019 Hall of Fame card, but if you guys want to skip that, I will leave timestamps down below. I am going to cover a few things about the 20 series and the 2080 Ti in particular. So just like the 4090 being plagued by all sorts of weird problems with its connectors, and recently the cracking PCB, the 2080 Ti didn't go without its own problems. When these first came out, they actually had failing Micron memory, and it took me 3 different cards before I got a card that was completely acceptable. You can tell also if you get a Founders Edition by the color of the box. The boxes of the original Micron memory models were this dark gray color, and the black box is the newer Samsung. It's a little bit harder to tell without taking the card apart on the other AIB brands, but that's something just to keep in mind. I had gotten quite a few people to order these, especially people who are in like the rendering scene. I have one friend, D. Jason, who ended up ordering 2 of these on launch day, and he used them for about 6 months. The first one failed pretty quickly, and then the second one failed shortly after. Luckily, they did replace them, but now that we are way out of the warranty window, they're kind of like ticking time bombs if you come across one. If you find one of these for a really good deal online, just ask the seller to check GPU-Z, or even if they want to take it apart and show the Samsung memory modules. So it's no surprise that Cyberpunk 2077 runs excellent on this hardware. It runs great on even a Steam Deck at this point. This is the 2023 update, and I can confirm that the 11 gigabytes of VRAM does really help you in this game, as I was seeing upwards of 9 gigabytes of VRAM usage. This game runs on average 62 FPS with a minimum of 44 and the 1% low of 32 at high settings with no DLSS. When turning DLSS on, we got a very nice buttery smooth 80 FPS roughly with a 60 FPS minimum and a 1% low of 44. This is the best way to play this game, in my opinion, high settings with DLSS quality. Turning on ray tracing, on the other hand, was a little bit different. We saw averages of around 40 FPS. It would jump kind of all over the place, and the experience was a little bit more stuttery than I would like to admit. It is playable if this is something you want to do. I just would suggest, I don't know, maybe capping it at 30 frames per second to get a more console-like experience, and yeah. Here we have everyone's favorite DLC from Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3. And this game runs exceptionally well. You're going to see that in a minute when I go into a private match. This is a public match, so the frame rate is a little bit inconsistent, but it is stable, that being said. I hate to admit, I don't know if it's the nostalgia for the older maps, but I've actually been having a lot of fun with this game, and it runs really good. Like, it runs way better than MW2 did, in my opinion. Maybe it's because MW2 had such a bad launch on PC. This game got an average of 91 FPS, a minimum frame rate of 68, and a 1% low of 31 FPS. Something I discovered while testing this game today was that they just released path tracing and ray reconstruction as a new update, and I was surprised to see how well this ran. Not only that, it looks pretty good too. There are some areas that look a little bit rough when you have DLSS on, but overall, the visual fidelity and the smoothness of the gameplay actually increased. This could be due to the fact that I'm on a private match testing this out here, but I was pretty surprised to see 100 FPS average with 73 and a 59 1% low. This is like a really well optimized game. I wish they would do this with all games when they come out, and I really wish this was just DLC because it kind of sucks that it's a whole game. Yes, the game that wastes your time. So this is a game I was really rooting for, as I'm a huge fan of all Bethesda games, but I feel like playing this game kind of is just a big time waste. And without getting too personal into my own feelings on this game, I'll say that even changing the settings doesn't do that much on this card. I jumped between high and low and medium settings and saw really no big difference between the performance. So that being said, let's jump into the numbers. We saw an average of 58 FPS with a minimum FPS of 44 and a 1% low of 33. The results were very stuttery. This game is very inconsistent, it's kind of all over the place. You'll see very good frame rates in areas like space, where we saw 69 with 55 and a 1% low of 41. This was playable and actually pretty enjoyable, but going back to New Atlantis, the headquarters for the entire game, it's just running terribly pretty much all the time. Jumping ahead to one of my favorite games of all time, this is The Last of Us Remastered on PC, and this game has actually come quite a long ways too on PC. It's running a lot better than it did when it first came out, so I was pretty happy to see that we got an average of 58 FPS, a minimum of 45, and a 1% low of 31. Now this is in tight areas with a lot of rain and effects going on, like the water dripping down. But if you switch over to a less intense area, like this area here on the docks, you'll see a really respectable 69 FPS on average with a minimum of 55 and a 1% low of 39. I did play this game on a controller, and I really didn't feel that much latency, which was really a pleasant surprise. Most of these games, when they start to dip down into the 30s, you start to really feel it, especially if you're used to PC and high refresh rate screens. So it was nice to play this, very enjoyable, even on this card. Maybe lower it to medium settings if you want to have a really nice 60 FPS lock. Up next, we have Jedi Survivor. Now, this game runs really good on PC hardware. When it first came out, it ran poorly, but they've updated it quite a bit as well, which is a current theme. We're getting an average 74 FPS with a minimum of 55 and a 1% low of 30. Now, this game felt very smooth as well, no real input lag on the controller, and it just overall is very pretty. Now, like I've said in the past, you will see frame rates fluctuate depending on the map that you're in or the city. For an example, in the very beginning of the game, there's a lot of stuff going on in the map, and that area can be pretty demanding. But this area that's a little more open, you're going to see an average of around 75, and you can obviously lower the settings to get a better experience, but this is how I visually wanted it to look as I was playing it. I feel like it plays and performs really well. A couple months back, I told my friend Mark to upgrade his card. He has a 2080 Ti EVGA, and he was like, why should I upgrade my card? Everything runs perfect. And now I just believe him. He runs a 1440p screen as well, and lowers a few of his settings, but overall is really happy with the games he's playing. That being said, this thing is also a beast for multitasking, editing videos, editing stuff on Lightroom. This is a really good card. If you can find one used for around $200, maybe $250, that's an awesome deal. Also, going back into like older games, this is Dishonored 2, you're going to see really great frame rates. This is 1440p maxed out. I was seeing an average of like 140 to 165 FPS. Really good playable experience, and I don't know, it's just a really good card still today if you have the right memory modules. Do not buy the Micron ones. If you can find the Samsung one, I say go for it if it's the right price. Anyway, shout out to Min for letting me borrow this card. I really appreciate you, bro. You're always hooking me up with cool deals and interesting things to use on my channel. If you guys liked the video, drop a like, sub, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.